Dillian Whyte did this interview a couple days ago on the Sky Sports Boxing YouTube channel where he's talking about smashing Deontay Wilder's face. Well, Dillian Whyte's attitude is very admirable. He's a warrior. Despite the fact that he's coming off a devastating KO defeat to Povetkin, he's maintained his same energy where he's calling out the Wilder'S and the Ruiz's and all these other people. And of course, he wants to fight Povetkin too. And he has expressed his frustration over the postponement of the Povetkin fight several times now. And in keeping with his previous attitude, he doesn't like staying out of the ring for a long time. Wants to get right back on the horse after he fell off. Dillian Whyte appears to be one of these guys that has an old school mentality, cut from the old school cloth. Fighters back in the 40s and 50s were like this. And in fact, most Jamaican fighters that I've seen over the years of any quality, and when I say Jamaican, I'm talking about people that were born and raised in Jamaica, not people that were born in the UK, US or whatever, or maybe born in Jamaica but lived most of their life in the UK. No, I'm talking about, and you know, Dillian's been in the UK, I think, since he was, 11, 12? But either way, he's still got the Jamaican accent to some degree. And the born and raised Jamaican fighters I've seen over the years, the majority of them are just tremendous warriors. And they're really not concerned about taking a few L's. They'll continue with the same confidence, the same tenacity, you know. That's what they tend to be like. I mean, a couple of heavyweight examples, Razor Ruddock was like that. Trevor Berbick was like that. I mean, Trevor Berbick, it was suicidal the way that he fought Mike Tyson, but he was determined not to be bullied. And yeah, terrible tactics, but he was confident going in there, you know. Anyway, Dillian Whyte is cut from that same mold. But be that as it may, he's still a human being at the end of the day. And I've spoken about this in several recent videos. You get a lot of these Dillian Whyte fans who are now attacking me, saying I'm a Dillian Whyte hater and all this ridiculous stuff because they don't understand the whole concept of dispassionate objective analysis. Now, my analysis could be wrong, but it's not coming from a place of hatred towards Dillian Whyte. It's not coming from a place of a desired outcome. Like I hope that Dillian Whyte loses so that, you know, no. I don't hope that Dillian Whyte loses. I've been someone that has praised Dillian Whyte for his achievements, for his attitude, for his willingness to fight pretty much anybody. How couldn't you praise that? So I've praised him for years. But as I've said before, no fighter is below praise, but also no fighter is above criticism. And it's not coming from a place of malice, but it's coming from a place of experience. I can't ignore the fact that over the years, I've seen countless fighters suffer devastating knockout defeats. And in the vast majority of cases, including with very, very good fighters, great fighters like Lennox Lewis, it affects them psychologically and maybe even neurologically, especially as it pertains to punch resistance. And so I can't ignore what I've seen before with other fighters. I can't ignore the fact that with Dillian Whyte, his punch resistance appeared to be affected, significantly affected, from the Anthony Joshua knockout. And the amount of times he's been hurt since then by shots that he was able to shake off quite easily in that AJ fight. You know, it wasn't until the 7th round when he was tired that AJ finally got to him and put him over. But prior to that, I mean, in the first round, 2nd round in particular, the shots that Dillian Whyte was taking, those kind of shots, I have to imagine, would have put him to sleep now. That's how it appears to me. Because after that AJ fight, he was hurt by Marius Wack. He was hurt by Robert Helenius. He was dropped by Oscar Rivas. He was dropped by Joseph Parker. Knocked out by Povetkin with one shot. just doesn't seem to have the same punch resistance to me. That's just my observation. It's not coming from a place of malice or any of this rubbish. It's just an observation. And now that he has been knocked out by Povetkin, is that going to affect his punch resistance even more? It's a question. Maybe it won't. Maybe he's going to be one of these fighters that bucks that trend. You know, who knows? It's a strange old world and anything can happen. But I got a few people saying to me, Hatman, you talk about Dillian Whyte's demons that he may be dealing with following his knockout defeat to Povetkin, but you completely fail to mention Deontay Wilder's demons and Andy Ruiz's demons because they're coming off defeats too. And Wilder, of course, was stopped. Well, the reason I didn't mention them is because I thought people would be smart enough to understand the difference between what happened to Dillian Whyte and what happened to Deontay Wilder and Andy Ruiz, but apparently not. I guess I give people too much credit. So I've put together this picture here because some people really are like children, and unless you draw them a picture, they don't understand. So here we go. This is the picture. Now, these two glasses of water, the water in the glasses represents psychological health, especially as it pertains to punch resistance. Okay, I'm not talking about mental health in a general sense, depression. No, I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about as it pertains to boxing and specifically punch resistance. Okay, so the reason I say punch resistance is because it's a very important thing in boxing, especially heavyweight boxing, where these guys are so big and hit so hard. I mean, you look at the heavyweights, there are far more knockdowns and knockouts at the high levels at heavyweight than there are at, let's say, welterweight. So punch resistance is so important at heavyweight. If you have a good chin, it's not the only thing that's important, of course. But if you suffer a knockout defeat, your opponents are going to smell blood. It's going to embolden them so much more. And how are you going to cope psychologically? Are there neurological side effects from that type of devastating knockout defeat? I don't know. But there certainly appear to be psychological effects, which is why a lot of fighters coming back from those kind of knockout defeats are gun shy. And even if they're not gun shy, as in the case with Dillian Whyte, they appear to have diminished punch resistance. So if we compare Dillian Whyte with Deontay Wilder at the moment, their psychological health, and remember, a lot of what goes on with regards to punch resistance is happening in the subconscious, not just in the conscious mind. But with regards to the psychological health, Dillian Whyte's was full prior to the AJ fight. Now, the AJ knockout defeat dropped that psychological health down some, and that resulted in, apparently, diminished punch resistance. Now, with Deontay Wilder, yes, he was stopped by Tyson Fury, but he didn't get sparked out. It's not going to hurt Deontay Wilder's confidence in his own chin as much as it would have hurt Dillian Whyte's, in all likelihood, because he took lots of big shots from Tyson Fury. It was a sustained beating over a number of rounds, and he was stopped on his feet. So going back into the ring, Deontay Wilder's not going to be as worried about getting knocked out with one shot, whereas with Dillian Whyte, he was winning against Povetkin. He dropped the guy twice in the previous round, and it was starting to look like a foregone conclusion. And right at the moment where he was at his apex, where he was at his most confident and felt like he had everything in hand, bang, one shot, the fight's over. Imagine carrying that into a rematch or into a fight with anybody who can punch. How can you relax? How can you feel settled in the fight when you know that at any moment you could get knocked out with one punch, even when you feel like you're totally in control? See, these are the kind of demons Dillian Whyte's going to have to deal with. This is the type of psychological burden that he has. Deontay Wilder getting stopped by Tyson Fury, yeah, he's going to come down, his psychological health, and Wilder's going to suffer different types of demons, right? But in terms of his psychological health as it pertains to punch resistance, it's not going to come down as much as Dillian Whyte's. Because he didn't get sparked out with one shot. It was loads and loads and loads of shots he had to take and was stopped on his feet. And then, of course, Dillian Whyte gets knocked out by Povetkin, because this is where I'm saying his psychological health as it pertains to punch resistance came down to following the AJ fight. After the Povetkin fight, I mean, we can only speculate, but is it going to come down as significantly as it did after the AJ fight? Who knows? Let's just say it comes down to here. So what I'm saying is, yeah, they've both suffered stoppage defeats, but Whyte's was more devastating in terms of how it will affect somebody's punch resistance, how it will affect their confidence in their own chin. I know Dillian Whyte is very outwardly confident, but a lot of this stuff is subconscious. So I'm not writing Dillian Whyte off. Maybe he's one of these exceptional fighters that can buck the trend and have no ill effects from a devastating knockout. But over the decades of watching boxing, participating in boxing, that's not the norm. Normally, fighters do have residual effects, be they psychological, neurological, or whatever. And that manifests in them not being able to take as good a shot or being gun shy. Now, Dillian Whyte might not be gun shy. He might still be very gung-ho. But what's he going to be like when he gets hit in his next fight back? If he gets hit a solid shot? I don't know. I'm interested to find out. Hopefully, he'll be fine. Hopefully, I'll be sitting here after Dillian Whyte's next fight and he takes a few big shots. And I'm like, wow, I was wrong. And Dillian Whyte did manage to buck the trend and be the type of fighter that can miraculously recover it immediately from a devastating knockout defeat like that and not suffer any residual effects. If that happens, it's all good. But I'm just coming from the perspective of somebody who's observed boxing over the years. You know, this is not coming from a place of malice. It's not a person who is trying to project a desired outcome. No. That's for the fanboys and all these kind of jokers. They try and project that onto me. But with me, it's not like that. With me, these are just dispassionate observations. My observations could be wrong, but they're not coming from a place of malice. There's no agenda behind it. It's just a dispassionate observation. So, as far as Andy Ruiz and his psychological health, again, Andy Ruiz lost on points against AJ. So he's not going to be questioning his own punch resistance. He's going to have full confidence in his own chin. Can you say the same for Dillian Whyte? Think about it. Andy Ruiz, throughout his career, has shown a better chin than Dillian Whyte. And obviously, boxing is a lot more than who has the better chin. But in heavyweight boxing, as you've seen, as you should know by now, you could be losing a fight, dropped twice in a previous round, and you come out and win by one punch knockout in the next round. That happens far more at heavyweight at the high levels than it does, as I said before, at something like welterweight. So, yeah, I think Deontay Wilder and Andy Ruiz would have far more confidence in their own ability to take a shot than Dillian Whyte. And when you're going in against guys who can punch, particularly Deontay Wilder, that's a daunting thing. A guy who's taller than you, who has tremendous punching power, who's able to strike at long range, and you just been knocked out with one punch in your previous fight by a guy who hits very hard, yes, but doesn't hit like Wilder. Who do you think, again, is going to be more concerned in the back of their mind about being knocked out, Whyte or Wilder? I think it's Dillian Whyte. And I think that would affect his performance. With Andy Ruiz, Dillian Whyte has longer arms than Andy Ruiz. Maybe he feels like he could keep him on the outside a bit. But again, with Andy Ruiz, Ruiz has got a better chin than Wilder. And I'm sure Dillian Whyte could hurt Andy Ruiz because Dillian Whyte can really punch. But again, if both guys were to land their best shots, Andy Ruiz on Dillian Whyte's chin and Dillian Whyte on Andy Ruiz's chin, if they were to fight next, who do you think would be more affected? I think it would be Dillian Whyte. So that's my take on it. Now, when it comes to punch resistance and confidence about your chin, following a devastating KO defeat, fighters can recover. Sometimes fighters never recover. Sometimes when they've been knocked out like that, they're never the same again in terms of punch resistance. But in some instances, they can recover, but it's usually not instantaneous. It's usually not in their next fight. It usually takes a number of fights. It's not really about the time. It's about the fights, because they have to go back in there, get hit, take a few shots, and that allows them to regain the confidence in their own chin. You understand? This is how it appears to work. So, perhaps Dillian Whyte gets in there, maybe shaky for a couple fights or one fight, but then gradually manages to get the confidence in his own chin back and is able to take the shots and, relax and all that kind of thing. We'll see. But again, I'm just going off what I've seen in boxing before. I'm just going off what I've seen in Dillian Whyte's career before. When he was fighting AJ that first time, well, they've only fought once, but when he was fighting AJ, he was taking tremendous shots. I mean, look at the second round alone and look at the shots Dillian Whyte was taking. How he didn't go down from those shots, I'll never know. AJ himself said to, something Eddie Hearn relayed to the viewers in an interview back in the days. He said, Dillian Whyte has got an incredible chin. This is what AJ was saying to Eddie Hearn, apparently, because of the shots that Dillian Whyte was able to take prior to finally capitulating in the seventh, where, AJ was able to get to him, hurt him with a number of shots, and then finish him off with an uppercut. But prior to that, I mean, the shots Dillian Whyte took were tremendous. But he doesn't appear to have that same punch resistance anymore. And it hasn't seemed to have gotten better, I talked about sometimes it just takes, a few fights where you're taking a few shots and then your punch resistance will recover. But with Dillian Whyte, has that been the case? He got hurt against Marius Wack, against Helenius, down against Rivas. I mean, he gets hurt in a lot of fights and put down in a lot of fights, Dillian, now. So how's this Povetkin one going to affect him? Again, perhaps it'll be some miraculous situation where all of a sudden Dillian Whyte appears to have a better chin in the Povetkin rematch, if that goes ahead, or the Wilder fight, than he did in the first Povetkin fight. Maybe something miraculous will happen. Okay, I can't completely rule it out. But based upon what I've seen in Dillian's career and in countless other fighters' careers, I would think it's unlikely. But let's see what happens. And as I've said before, I think Dillian should take Eddie Hearn's advice and not look for Deontay Wilder right now. And again, I admire Dillian Whyte's spirit, but I want to see Dillian Whyte at his best. I don't want to see a Dillian Whyte who has demons in his subconscious as it pertains to punch resistance. And, that could manifest in decreased punch resistance. It could manifest potentially in gun shyness, although that's probably not going to be the case with Dillian. I would rather see Dillian firing on all cylinders, 100% confidence in his own chin. I'd like to see that Dillian go up against Ruiz or Wilder, rather than a Dillian who's coming off a devastating KO defeat. I'd rather he goes and sorts the situation out or tries to sort the situation out with Povetkin. And it makes more sense, of course, from the WBC title shot perspective as well, because Povetkin is the interim champion right now. So, is it the interim? Yeah, I think it's the interim champion, isn't he? Some type of situation with the WBC, but it's the equivalent of being mandatory challenger, pretty much, more or less. So he still has the opportunity, if he goes ahead with that Povetkin rematch, to get that, but we don't know what's going on with Povetkin at the moment. Maybe Povetkin will retire. That's a possibility. And then Dillian Whyte can fight somebody else for that WBC position. But assuming the fight is going to go ahead, then I think Dillian Whyte should stick to that path like Eddie Hearn has advised him to. That's Eddie Hearn's most recent advice. And if he manages to win, I think he should focus on whoever the WBC champion is, secure that shot, see what he can do. If he can win a world heavyweight title, great. If not, then he can start looking at the Ruiz's, the Wilder'S, and all those kind of people. Now, Dillian is a risk taker, and risk taking has got Dillian Whyte very far in his career and in his life. As the old saying goes, fortune favors the bold. And that's definitely the case for Dillian. But the more you gamble, eventually it's going to go against you. It went against him in that Povetkin fight. And if he continues on with that attitude, the cavalier attitude of just gambling, rolling the dice, particularly when it would appear as though he's vulnerable right now, or potentially vulnerable, you run the risk of the same thing happening sooner rather than later. So I think for right now, it will be better for Dillian Whyte to be smart, stick to that Povetkin rematch, rather than just looking to fight anybody, the most dangerous guy out there, like, yeah, give me that guy. I'm happy for Dillian Whyte to fight anybody, but I want him to be 100%. Same way with any fighter. I want them to be 100% when they step in the ring. If they're going to go up against somebody who's really formidable, I want them to be 100%. I don't want to see a compromised version of themselves. Don't you want to see, as a boxing fan, two fighters getting in there at their best? Not one of them slightly compromised or whatever. No, I want to see them both at their best. So, anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments below about Dillian Whyte, him saying he wants to do this and that to Wilder, smash him to pieces. Still overtly very confident on the surface. But I do wonder what's going on in the subconscious. In fact, just to finish, you notice that Dillian Whyte is growing his little mohawk, right, back. This was his old hair style. Now, for some fights, Dillian Whyte opted to go completely bald. In fact, his past few fights, he's been bald, right? Against Povetkin, against Mariusz Wach, was he bald against Oscar Rivas? I think he might have been bald in that fight as well against Oscar Rivas. Now he's gone back to the mohawk, or whatever you would call this. Is there something significant in that? Because sometimes when a fighter loses, they will try to distance themselves from the version of themselves that lost, and instead recapture a version of themselves that was winning. And Dillian Whyte, of course, won many fights in impressive fashion when his hair was like this. I know some people are going to say, you're reading into something that's not there, Hat Man. Maybe I am. And I'm really not saying that this is the case. I'm just saying it's a possibility. Human beings often reveal things about their psychological state through their physical appearance. I mean, even if you went to somebody's house and you looked at the way they keep their house, it tells you something about them psychologically. Or if there's changes in their appearance, changes in the way they keep their home and so on, it could tell you something about their psychological state. So, as I say, with Dillian, going back to this hair, maybe it means absolutely nothing. But then again, maybe it is him trying to dissociate himself from the version that got sparked by Povetkin and recapture the version of himself that maybe knocked out whoever, It kind of reminds me a bit of David Haye when he fought Tony Bellew Because in the first Bellew fight, David Haye was wearing black shorts, black trunks. In the second fight, he lost, I think he lost quite a lot of weight going into the second fight. Correct me if I'm wrong. But he certainly came out with his old Haymaker shorts on, his old Haymaker trunks, the Union Jack ones. And to me, that was a sign again that Haye was trying to dissociate himself from the version that lost to Bellew, because he never thought he could lose to Tony Bellew. He tried to dissociate himself from that version, and instead, because even the haircut, right? He had the Sideshow Bob haircut in the first Bellew fight. Whereas for the second Bellew fight, in fact, no, did he have the Sideshow Bob hair? Maybe he didn't. Maybe he did have the cane rolls in. But either way, he was wearing different shorts. He was heavier. Whereas for the rematch with Bellew, he came in lighter and he wore his old Haymaker shorts, the Union Jack shorts. And to me, again, that was an indication that David Haye psychologically was trying to dissociate himself from the version that lost to Bellew and instead recapture who he was earlier on in his career during the glory days. Hence the shorts and all that kind of thing. So, you know, these are the things I look for. I've always found human psychology fascinating, which is why a lot of my videos are angled in that way, where I give my assessment. A lot of it is speculation, of course, but then again, psychology or psychiatry, these are not exact sciences. These are interpretations of human behavior. There are many people, even in the academic world, who say, you know, psychology, psychiatry, these things are not sciences at all. How can they be? Because they can't be exact. You're dealing with too much supposition, interpretation, and so on. But either way, I find it interesting. And 2020 was the most revealing case study when it comes to human psychology that you'll probably ever see in your lifetime. 2020 and ongoing, even right now, but 2020 in particular. If you're into sociology, psychology, and so on, 2020 was just an incredible case study. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments below about all the points I've raised in this video. Come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide range of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&A sessions, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got a Discord server where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. There's no contract, no commitment, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.